How Roza Shanina became the ruthless and cruel Soviet sniper. April 1944. The forests of Belarus were waking from another brutal winter when a young woman in a worn Red Army tunic pressed her cheek against the wooden stock of a Mosin Nagant rifle. The air was damp and cold. In the stillness ahead, she watched a flicker of movement, an enemy helmet shifting above the trench line. She exhaled, squeezed the trigger, and watched the figure collapse. It was her first confirmed kill. Her name was Roza Shanina, 20 years old, from a remote northern village. Within months, she would become one of the most feared snipers on the Eastern Front. Roza Georgievna. Shanina had grown up far from war. She was born in 1924 in the small village of Edma, Arkhangelsk Oblast, a place of frozen fields and long winters, deep in the north of what was then the Soviet Union. Childhood in the north. Roza was the daughter of a logger and a milkmaid. Her family lived modestly, relying on the forest for their livelihood. But she was not a child easily content with staying inside traditional roles. She excelled in school, was curious, and possessed a sharp, determined mind. She walked several kilometers every day to attend classes in a nearby village, a display of perseverance that hinted at the steel within her. Her family home, surrounded by pine forests, became a place where she learned self-reliance. She was strong, agile, and comfortable in the outdoors. From an early age, she learned to shoot, initially to scare away wolves or hunt small game. What started as survival skills would later become the foundation of her lethal precision. In 1938, at the age of 14, she defied expectations. She walked away from her village, determined to study in Arkhangelsk. She lived in a dormitory and attended college, studying literature and education. She dreamed of becoming a teacher, not a soldier. War was far away, until it wasn't. War comes home. In June 1941, Operation Barbarossa, Nazi Germany's massive invasion of the Soviet Union, changed everything. The thunder of war rolled eastward, swallowing villages, cities, and millions of lives. Roza's brothers were called to the front. One of them, Mikhail, was killed in action in 1941. Another would fall later. The grief hardened her resolve. In her diary she wrote, "I must take revenge for my brother. I must do something for my country." But the Red Army did not easily accept women into combat roles at the time. Many were pushed into support positions: nurses, clerks, communications. Roza refused to remain behind the lines. In 1942, she enrolled in a civilian defense course and became a markswoman. Her natural aim stunned her instructors. In 1943, after much persistence, she was accepted into the Central Women's Sniper Training School near Moscow, one of the few places where Soviet women could train as elite snipers. Forged in the sniper school. The sniper school was brutal. Days began before dawn with hours of physical training, crawling through mud, learning to disappear into the terrain, and shooting targets no bigger than a helmet hundreds of meters away. Snipers were not ordinary soldiers. They were hunters, trained to outthink and outweight their prey. Roza thrived in this environment. Her instructors quickly noticed her steady hand, calm under pressure, and her ability to remain motionless for hours. She learned the art of camouflage, stalking, and the psychological discipline required to kill deliberately. The Mosin Nagant M18-9-130 rifle with a PU scope became her companion. Though simple by modern standards, it was devastating in skilled hands. She learned to judge wind direction, bullet drop, and movement. By the end of her training, she graduated with honors. In April 1944, she was deployed to the 184th Rifle Division on the 3rd Belarusian Front. She was 19. Baptism by fire. Her first mission came quickly. The Soviet army was pushing westward, trying to reclaim Belarus from the German occupation. The fighting was fierce, brutal, often hand-to-hand. Snipers like Roza were used to cover infantry movements, eliminate machine gun crews, and sow terror among German soldiers. That damp April morning, she squeezed the trigger and took her first life. The man she shot fell backward into the trench. Roza did not look away. She recorded it in her notebook later. "My first fascist. I do not feel sorry. They killed my brother." By the end of that week, she had 3 confirmed kills. Within months, that number grew rapidly. She was often positioned ahead of the main Soviet line, crawling through mud and snow, lying in wait for hours, picking off targets one by one. Her calmness earned her the nickname the Silent Huntress among comrades, Sniper of the Eastern Front. By summer 1944, Roza had more than 30 confirmed kills. That number would rise to 59 by the end of her life, though unofficial estimates suggest even higher totals. Snipers like Roza played a psychological role on the battlefield. German soldiers feared them deeply. A single well-placed shot could paralyze entire platoons with fear, keeping heads down and movements restricted. Roza's hunting grounds were the dense forests and ruined villages of Belarus and Lithuania. She often worked with other female snipers, a small sisterhood of deadly women who shared the same cause. They were not given special treatment. They marched, fought, and killed like the men beside them. She became known for a particular skill: doublets, hitting 2 enemies with 2 rapid shots in a matter of seconds. This rare ability required incredible control and was celebrated in Soviet sniper circles. She also volunteered for dangerous missions. While most snipers operated from defensive positions, Roza often moved forward, seeking better angles, pushing closer to German lines. Her boldness made her a hero, and also put her in constant danger. The girl in the newspapers. In late 1944, Soviet newspapers began writing about her. A 20-year-old woman sniper who hunted Nazis was perfect propaganda material. She became a symbol of the new Soviet woman: brave, determined, deadly. Photographs of her smiling in uniform, Mosin Nagant, across her lap, were circulated widely. Yet behind that image was a young woman who still wrote in her diary about fear, exhaustion, and the weight of taking lives. She wrote, "Every shot is a life. I have no right to miss." Roza did not see herself as a hero. She saw herself as someone who had a job to do: to avenge, to protect, to push the invaders out of her country. The road to East Prussia. In the autumn of 1944, the Soviet army advanced west into German territory. Roza's division was part of the forces pushing through Lithuania toward East Prussia, aiming to strike at the German heartland. The closer they came to Germany, the more desperate the fighting became. Roza refused promotions that would have taken her away from the front line. She could have become an instructor or stayed in safer positions behind the lines. Instead, she asked to remain with her sniper unit at the front. In October, during heavy fighting in Lithuania, she was nearly killed by shell fire. She survived, injured, but alive. Her unit suffered heavy casualties. She returned to the front after only a short recovery. She wrote in her diary, "If I die, they will write a line in a newspaper. But I want my bullets to speak louder than words." Heroism and recognition. Her commanders recognized her exceptional bravery. In 1944, she was awarded the Order of Glory, 3rd class, one of the Soviet Union's highest honors for personal courage in combat. Unlike some decorated soldiers who were pulled back for propaganda tours, Roza remained in the mud and blood of the front. She was often seen moving alone at night, finding sniper positions before dawn, and disappearing into the landscape. Her comrades spoke of her as both gentle and fierce. She often helped wounded soldiers, shared rations, and laughed like any young woman. But once she lay behind the scope of her rifle, she became a ghost. Diary of a Sniper. One of the most remarkable aspects of Roza's life is that she kept a personal diary. This was unusual and dangerous. Diaries could be considered a security risk, yet she recorded her thoughts, fears, and hopes almost daily. Her diary reveals a young woman aware of her own mortality. She often wondered whether she would live to see the end of the war. She spoke of wanting to return to her village, to finish her studies, to have a peaceful life. But she also wrote of her determination to keep fighting. "I can't imagine myself not here. If they need me, I will stay. I will fight. I will kill every fascist I see." Her words paint a complex portrait, not a soulless killer, but a young woman molded by the brutality around her. Into the Inferno. East Prussia, 1945. In January 1945, Roza's division entered East Prussia. The Germans fought desperately to defend their homeland. Battles were fierce and chaotic, with artillery barrages, airstrikes, and close-quarters combat. Roza's role as a sniper became even more dangerous. The terrain was more open, and the enemy more experienced. She still volunteered to move with the infantry, an unusual role for a sniper, who normally stays behind. On January 18th, near the German town of Ilmsdorf, she spotted German machine gun positions pinning down Soviet troops. She advanced under heavy fire to provide cover. She killed several gunners, allowing Soviet forces to advance. But the fighting was relentless. 4 days later, during the East Prussian offensive, tragedy struck. The final battle on January 27, 1945, near the town of Richau, now in modern-day Poland, Roza and her comrades came under heavy German artillery fire. She was assisting wounded soldiers in a shell hole when shrapnel struck her in the chest. Even as she bled, she continued to help others. She was carried to a field hospital, but her injuries were too severe. She died the next day, January 28, 1945. She was 20 years old. She was buried with full military honors near the battlefield. Her fellow soldiers wept. One of them later wrote, "She died like she lived, fearless." Legacy of a young warrior. Roza Shanina was officially credited with 59 confirmed kills, though the real number may have been higher. She was posthumously celebrated as a war hero. Streets, schools, and monuments were named after her in the Soviet Union. Her diary was preserved and published years later, revealing the human story behind the propaganda image. She became a symbol of courage, sacrifice, and the extraordinary role women played in the Soviet war effort. Snipers like her had a disproportionate impact on the battlefield. They sowed fear, disrupted enemy movements, and supported their comrades in ways that often determined the success of assaults. Women of the Eastern Front. Roza was not alone. More than 800,000 women served in the Soviet armed forces during the war, and around 2,000 were trained snipers. Many, like Lyudmila Pavlichenko, the Lady Death with over 300 confirmed kills, became legendary figures. But what made Roza unique was her age, her courage to refuse a safer path, and the intimate diary she left behind. She was both a soldier and a young woman with dreams, fears, and determination. The Nazis saw her as a ruthless killer. The Soviets saw her as a hero. History remembers her as both. A Face in the Snow. Decades later, her story still resonates. In photographs, she looks barely older than a student, smiling shyly in uniform, rifle at her side. But beneath that innocent face was someone who crawled through frozen mud, lay in wait for hours, and pulled the trigger on dozens of men. She once wrote, "I'm not afraid to die. I'm afraid of not doing enough." Her death came months before the end of the Second World War in Europe. She never saw the Soviet victory she fought for. But in the forests of Belarus and the ruins of East Prussia, the name Roza Shanina was spoken with respect and fear. a symbol beyond war. In modern times, historians look at Roza's life as more than just a story of wartime heroism. It is also a story of how young lives were consumed by a global conflict. She was a symbol used by the state, but also a real human being who chose to fight when she could have stayed behind. Her diary continues to inspire and haunt readers. It shows how war turns ordinary people into warriors, and how even the most determined soldiers carry private burdens. Her grave remains a place of quiet remembrance. In her hometown, a monument stands with her name. Not far from it, the forests are still and quiet, much like the places where she once hunted her enemies. Conclusion: the Huntress of the Eastern Front. Roza Shanina was only 20 years old when she became one of the most feared Soviet snipers of the Eastern Front. From a remote northern village to the heart of the bloodiest war in human history, she forged herself into a weapon. Driven by grief, loyalty, and a sense of duty. She was a hunter in the snow, a shadow with a rifle, a young woman who wrote in her diary about death and dreams. She killed dozens of enemy soldiers not out of cruelty alone, but out of a cold understanding. The war demanded it. I must take revenge. I must protect my country. Her name endures as a symbol of sacrifice and deadly skill. The huntress who stalked the Nazi invaders and left a legacy carved into the history of the Second World War.